Okay. All right, everyone. Good evening. I hope everyone's had a great week, good month. This entire year has been tough. November's been especially hard in our household as well, with a couple of medical issues going on with COVID. And just, overall, it's been an emotionally charged year. So, we're going to be doing a reading of Tears in the Flag. I'm going to read chapter 9, but before I get started, I kind of wanted to talk about the purpose of this book. This book is more of a call to action for everyone. It covers the DREAM Act, it covers DACA, and one of the reasons why I've been promoting it so heavily this year is because the Supreme Court had a ruling on DACA earlier this year in June in the middle of COVID crisis, and now the new president-elect Joe Biden has promised in the first 100 days that they're going to pass the DREAM Act. For those of you who don't know what the DREAM Act or DACA is, it is a deferred action for childhood arrivals for kids who were brought over, with their parents over to the U.S. And became undocumented immigrants. Of course, these children had, no fault of their own being brought over to the U.S. And, here we are. In 2020, the DREAM Act has been tossed around since 2007 when George W. Bush was president. It went around in 2011 when Barack Obama was president. And, as the new administration comes in 2021, my effort today is to get more attention on the DREAM Act and, to get the president-elect to get this done because these people have been waiting for long enough. So bear with me on that, and, let's get reading on chapter 9. So let's get going. A great many things were happening in the background while I was in college. The majority of my family was in Punjab, India, Patiala to be exact, a city 6 hours north of New Delhi that had become home to my extended family after my great-grandparents migrated from Rawalpindi during the partition. India became an independent country in 1947, and with that independence agreement, Pakistan was born as a concession to the Muslim population of India to have a country of their own. The idea was that if you're a Hindu or Sikh, you could still choose to remain in Pakistan, and vice versa if you were a Muslim in India. But that didn't go as planned. According to the Indian perspective, Muslims started executing Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan, and their actions were returned in kind by the Sikhs and the Hindus in India. An estimated 2 million people died during the Great Peace of 1947, including my grandfather's family members on my dad's side. The story had got even more diabolical when family betrayed family in the midst of their world collapsing around them. My great-grandfather had 2 other brothers, one older and one younger. The elder brother was retired from the army, where he had served British India, and the younger was still on active duty, stationed in Jalandhar, India. My family members were landowners in Rawalpindi, soon to be Pakistan. When the partition happened, they left everything behind and made their way to India so quickly that my grandfather, 18 at the time, was given a coat by a bystander at the Lahore station. His exact words 70 years later were, "I couldn't believe my life had come to this, that I had to wear someone else's coat." He didn't say those words out of arrogance, but to acknowledge the violent change of circumstances. When my family arrived in Patiala, they lived in a refugee camp. My great-grandmother passed away during this time, and when my great-grandfather filed a claim in Delhi for the loss of life and land, he realized his younger brother had declared the entire family dead during the partition. With his position in the army and the connections in Delhi, he had succeeded in claiming all the land offerings that the government was allocating to the victims. Even after my great-grandfather made multiple trips to Delhi to try and reconcile with his brother, the younger brother wanted nothing to do with my great-grandfather. In a last-ditch effort to sway him to come to his senses, my great-grandfather wrote his younger brother a final letter. His brother's response was, "Delhi is right here. Aake fateh kar lo. Come and conquer it." We had gone from landlords to refugees with nothing to our name. Soon after this, my paternal grandfather was married to my grandmother, who came from a very different background through an arranged marriage. At this time, arranged marriages were still a cultural norm. It was evident to everyone that my grandfather was not happy with his union. My grandfather was an ambitious man, while my grandmother was a humble, God-loving woman. I've always felt that there was something in our family genes that caused us to never fully feel satisfied or fulfilled with our own lives. that sense of dissatisfaction would be transferred from my grandfather to my father and then to me. Each one of us craved a life filled with experiences, and accepting the status quo wasn't in our cards. 3 generations down, we would continue to take risks, refusing to accept no for an answer. We didn't abide by the can't-do philosophy. We set out to do everything. My grandfather escaped to Europe and then to Bangladesh, leaving family behind in Patiala, 6 kids and 17 grandchildren. With the exception of one daughter who was married off to a wealthy family in Gulu, the rest of the family continued to struggle. When I asked my grandfather what happened to his uncle and his family, I was told that they all lived in a very different reality than the family he had left behind. The legacy of our family is the legacy of our people. India was conquered and invaded by the Mughals, Persians, Afghanis, and the British, all because we could never come together as a people and fight them as a unified nation. United we stand, and divided we fall. It was only logical that I picked up a history major in addition to a political science at this time in college. Despite the odds, my father had made it to America, the land of opportunity, and it didn't matter that he hadn't become as successful as the mythical tales of many before him. The American dollar went a long way in India, and his family expected him to provide assistance to the rest who didn't have much. My Chachaji, Dad's younger brother and the youngest of their siblings, had lost his wife at an early age to a heart attack. She left behind 2 young girls, Komal and Kajal. Mom arrived in India around the same time that this tragedy had taken place, and she decided to informally adopt both of these girls under her care. In the 1980s, my younger Tayaji, Dad's second eldest brother, immigrated back to India after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan and bombed the school where he was principal. Unsurprisingly, he was a little messed up in the head from that experience. He had 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. The second child, Gurpreet, was an intelligent young woman with big dreams but no means to make them a reality. During Mom's time in India, Gurpreet also started living with her in our house in Patiala. In order to pay for everyone's living expenses, Dad would send money to India every month, and that money was used to pay for their education. The fact was that Dad was not a very rich man. He would earn around $2,000 a month, and our new home mortgage was $1,300 at an interest rate of 6%. When requests for money started increasing after Mom arrived in India, he would often lose his temper and be extremely frustrated by the constant pressure on him to send money. My Kabul wale Tayaji, the one who had lived in Afghanistan, had paid for Dad's college back in the 80s, and so Dad returned the favor by paying for his daughter's nursing school education. During my time in college, I was the only person financially responsible for my education. Dad never even asked me how much my tuition payments were or how much a college textbook cost. And because he didn't ask, I never told him how much I could have used his help. It was my ego that believed that even if no one was there for me, I could still succeed. A few years later, my favorite teacher, Dr. Jenny from the History Secondary Education Department, told me that you can't do everything great if you have too much on your plate. I said to myself, watch me, and got the highest GPA of my college career, even after taking 24 credit hours while interning on Fridays and working Saturday and Sundays. I believed that since I had been able to go through the previous few years when no one believed that I could, then what else couldn't I do? I started believing in overcoming this Novin mentality and started idolizing the role of the underdog. I knew the odds were stacked against me, but they could not break me. Whenever anyone said I couldn't do something, I took it as a challenge to prove them wrong. This mindset didn't just start in college. It had always been a part of me going back to my skating days in Karnal. When the coaches thought that I wasn't going to get anywhere because of poor equipment or average skills, I gave it my all during competitions and then some. Just like the strap-on wheels used for my skates in the 1997 Karnal City Championship, I had been dealt a bad hand in life. But like hell, I was going to let them stop me from winning the gold. Naturally, I became attracted to fictional characters like Rocky Balboa from Rocky III and used his theme song, Eye of the Tiger, as a mentality I wanted to carry myself with. It was not only my ringtone and my alarm in the morning, it was also who I was, my personal catchphrase of the decade. I had decided my life would not be defined by the decisions of others or their assumptions of what I could accomplish. However, I would continue to make that mistake repeatedly and refuse to acknowledge it for many years to come. My underdog mentality became my arrogance, and with each passing accomplishment, it cemented aspects of my behavior. Even when others offered constructive criticism, I took it personally as an insult. I had always been overly sensitive toward criticism even as a child, always trying to please everyone. Without a parent to help navigate my emotions and share my fears, I was becoming rigid in my ways. I refused to acknowledge any deficiency within myself because I perceived it to be a weakness that I could not afford during these times. I didn't have the time to stop myself and process my emotions, but if I had, I don't think I could have made it. My worldly maturity had grown because of what I had seen at a young age, but my emotional maturity was still stuck at the age of 12. My father suffered from some of these same flaws. He was unable to communicate or understand his emotions in a healthy manner. So even though he meant well deep down, his behaviors and actions came off horrifically. Being independent of having an adult figure around at the beginning of my teenage years became a handicap that I dismissed. I saw the criticism of others in the same way that my father punished me, so I would instantly become defensive. My mother was so much more aware of her emotions, but she was on the other side of the world. The one time I opened up to my mom about my feelings and shared my desire to cut my hair, instead of dismissing me or thinking less of me because I wanted to separate from our religion, she was kind and listened to how I felt. She helped me process an emotion that I'd carried for so long that had manifested itself as a bullseye for others to target me since we had come to America. But even though we had started speaking more often since I owned my own cell phone, our biggest emotional breakthrough was limited to that night. Mom had a way of reverting back to the story of her decision to leave rather than remaining in the present to witness how her son was growing. I couldn't blame her for the fact that our relationship was becoming more distant with each passing year. We were becoming very different people than who we were at that day at JFK. 10 years later, I would agree with Dr. Jenny. No matter how much you think you can handle in life, if you have too much on your plate, something will come back to bite you. All right, I'm going to stop there. It was a brief chapter reading today. My goal really is if you could please like my page. It's my author page. And go on my Amazon website. It's also in the link of this video. If you can go and please give me a review. There were over 430 people who watched the last reading. I'm still stuck at 11 reviews. I've sold a couple hundred copies of the book, and I've gotten a couple of messages from people I haven't spoken to in 10, 15 years on how great the book is. But the thing is, the book can't accomplish anything unless we get the word out. And it takes all of us to get this done. So I would really appreciate it if you would just click on the link in the Amazon, go and review it. Please give it 5 stars, or if you have a couple of constructive words to add on that would help others, put their mind on this topic, I would really appreciate it. The DREAM Act is something that's near and dear to my heart. It's part of this story, and I really hope that you would be a part of that change. So thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate you all. And please share and like and subscribe.